Okay, so that's recording now. So
hello everyone and welcome. I am Eleni and we will be discussing about organizational structure today. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to go around the room and get to know you a bit, which I would really prefer. But I hope that I will get to know you while we're having the discussions throughout the module. And please feel free to talk, open your mic and talk at any time, even while I'm presenting, because this will make the class more interesting rather than going through me talking for 2 hours. So anything that you would like to say or ask before we go through the first slides? No? Great, thanks.
no. Can I just ask everybody to put their cameras on if possible, please?
That would be really helpful than talking to black boxes. Thank you.
Apologies, my camera's not working.
All right.
So.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, just go ahead, Eleni, then. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Jane. So welcome. So the first part, although we're talking mostly about organizational design and structure, we're going to talk a bit first about growth. And if you would like to put in the chat or to open your mic and talk and say, how do you measure your business growth? Is it one of these here, like sales, number of employees, profitability perhaps, and social impact, or do you have other indices? Let's see, someone has written something. Turnover, profit, yes, thank you. Profit. Sales turnover, social impact, yes. Right. So it's mostly indices that have to do with an amount or an outcome or an output, a size of output, right? But also growth, we can measure it according to quality improvement, or we can measure it according to a process or development of the organization. And then when you're thinking about how your organization has started and how your business has grown so far, can you identify, just think about this, and then when we go through the model, you can maybe tell us how you've passed through specific phases perhaps, or maybe there were certain opportunities or challenges that you faced along the way, and then just have a think while we're going through this. So the first part is that growth means changes in the characteristics of our business and the way that our businesses operate. So in order to see how this looks like, we have here the model from Quinn and Cameron, which looks at the organization starting first as a startup, then going through a growth phase, and then through maturity phase, and perhaps later on either going to exit or rebirth. This model is also superimposes a new update from Greiner on the previous model. And actually what it says is that at the beginning, when we have the organization, it's usually mostly the owner. They develop the organization, they have to work hard, they focus mostly on a particular perhaps product or service. And then they're growing through creativity, through designing and developing the idea that they have for the organization. But as the organization grows, then there's a need for more leadership. There's a need for to manage the people that are being hired as the organization perhaps becomes larger. So then after this happens and there's appropriate leadership put in place, the organization grows through direction because the new leadership has set direction and norms. And as the organization grows further, there might be a need for autonomy because maybe the new leader has set too many formal rules, too many processes. And as the organization grows, there might be more, let's say, bureaucracy in there, and people might need more autonomy to make decisions faster. And so then the next phase, once we have passed through this, would be the growth through delegation. So in that phase, people are given the chance to make decisions at different parts of the organization. But after a while, this becomes too much control, perhaps. And then there's a need for coordination. There's a need for having control in a way that that is more formalized, rather than going through the main leader, the previous leader having to control the situation. So then the organization becomes more coordinated, there are more rules, but this might create more bureaucracy, and then we have a crisis or red tape. So we are locked, let's say, in the same rules that we have put there in the bureaucratic organization. And so there's a need then to open up the organization, make it less bureaucratic, streamline processes, and then maybe include autonomous, self-directed teams. So then we grow through collaboration, and then there are new, perhaps, crises as the organization goes into a new phase of perhaps renewal or rebirth. Does this make sense, or was I perhaps too fast? Yeah, it makes sense. Great, thank you. So when you're looking at this, can you see where your organization is now, and have you passed? These phases this is an analytical model, right? So organizations don't go so linear in such a linear way through all the phases. So it could be back and forth, it could be iterative, it could be to one phase and maybe skip another phase. But can you identify phases or perhaps where you are now and how you have to resolve them, the crisis? Would anyone like to talk?
I suppose we're kind of like not a crisis in leadership or anything like that, round about the beginning part. I suppose we came from it being a small organization, a single owner, and obviously that the management piece is obviously trying to be put into place. And I suppose it's like Colm Hennessy, who started off, the company, is maybe because it's his and it was like his baby, it's like difficult for him to like relinquish some of that. So, and I suppose that might be the same for other small organizations that it's hard to kind of like put in place a team if it's yours and it's always been yours and you want to hang on to it a little bit more.
Yes, exactly. And then this is what happens usually here in the second stage, that the leader is usually quite reluctant to let it go. And they might be a great leader, but in many cases, if they are the person who developed an idea or a product, they might be more suited to keep developing the product rather than leading people, which might be a need there. So large organizations usually here bring in managers, like top managers or new CEOs, or people who would just take the people management in. Thank you.
I think, sorry, when you're a small to medium business as well, and there are, especially at the very beginning, where you're at that growth stage of leadership, creativity, direction, I think one of the best things that we did as a company was we did a leadership sort of almost like a personality trait thing, where they basically put you answer questions and you get basically given a color as such as to how your personality is as a leader. And I think we all came out in different colors. So some of us were creative, some of us were more social, some of us were more red, straight to the point. So I think we sit with our colors when we're having a leadership meeting, so that we all are respectful of that's why you're like that. It's not to be taken personally, so that we know that we don't go into a crisis as such of he said, you said. And the decision making is much more clearer.
So Angela, was that emotional IQ thing that you can do that it tells you like how much or how little empathy people have?
Yes, pretty
Not that
much,
I'm
yeah.
saying that people aren't empathetic, obviously they are, but yeah. Okay, no,
Yeah,
that's
it
quite
was really
interesting.
interesting. We got a lot out of it because we are so different, and I think because of our business as well, it's a construction business, so the CPD that they get isn't often based around psychological leadership skills. It's all about tools and building and things like that. So as a management team, if we're now moving into that sort of stage, then that was really interesting. It was Discovery Insights, I think it was called, that we used, and it was really good for us.
That's
So is
really
that just an online thing, Angela?
It was through the Build Lanarkshire group. Her name was Susan Cool, and she was the representative that came out to us and did it with us.
Okay.
And she'll come out to your organisation and do it with everyone there, obviously at a
Right,
cost as
okay.
well, but
Okay, great, thanks.
that helped us.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, great for everything, not just phases of growth, but this is a really useful tool to have. And especially because, as you said, you're using it also afterwards in all the meetings that you have, which is great. So then within the organization, we're looking to see what does it take to grow your business. So one thing that, Angela mentioned, and Paul as well, is people. So we know that people are what drives an organization, but there are other resources, and there's also combinations of resources. So it's not just what is happening now in more complex environments. We can't just say that, oh, we have a good system of logistics, so that's why that can keep us as the drivers in the business. We need to be able to be combining capabilities, to be able to having more dynamic aspects of the organization, bringing them together, and also creating an organization that is adaptive to learning, adaptive to change at all the times. And so dynamic capabilities, here's a cute dog to demonstrate dynamic capabilities, and they are separated from operational capabilities. So operational capabilities are the normal everyday capabilities that an organization hasn't developed, but the dynamic capabilities are the capabilities that allow an organization to change more easily, to become more agile. So they could be combinations of capabilities, they could be for example, the Toyota innovation development system. It could be Bristol Myers Squibb, who had a dynamic capability in being able to absorb mergers and acquisitions very easily, and a lot of other pharmaceuticals are developing this way of having dynamic capabilities. So the ability of your organization to be able to combine capabilities, and also the capabilities that allow the organization to change more easily. Do you have in mind anything that you are already doing in terms of having dynamic capabilities in your organizations? Something that you are good at, or something that you have learned so well and can help you adapt to change? Maybe something that helped you change through COVID?
Again, I suppose thinking about we're a small consultancy house, and things did change quite dramatically for us during COVID, because obviously prior to that, most companies would have wanted us to be on site, and working with them, working with their teams, etc. And obviously we had to kind of like adapt to that, and obviously while people were maybe a little bit wary of using Teams and stuff like that, I'm wondering, were we still going to be able to fulfill all our obligations kind of like off-site, and just interacting with Teams, etc. But it did actually work really, really well, to the point that, to be honest with you, I think now most of the companies that we work with probably wouldn't want us to be on site that often, because obviously it saves them the costs of traveling costs, etc. So yeah, I suppose kind of like embracing, I suppose, more of the kind of you know, the functionalities that's out there with you know, Zoom and Teams and stuff like that has maybe helped us to grow a little bit. So
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you. And technology always is well, it's becoming more and more now with the introduction of AI even more. And so here we have this adaptive and predictive planning. So this is the difference between planned change and emergent change. And you've probably seen them lived through this in any kind of change project that you've done so far, which is through the adaptive planning is this plan change where we say we are here and we want to go from, we are from A and we want to go to B, and we have certain steps that we're going to do this. Whereas with that's predictive planning, and then with adaptive planning we have this idea that change is always emergent. So we are creating an organization that can be flexible enough and agile enough to be able to change or to be able to redirect as changes are coming into the organization, perhaps from the outside or from the inside, or as a decision. And so with the predictive planning, this plan change, we're going through specific steps to arrive, as we said, from A to B. And then in adaptive planning, we are readjusting the organization as we go along. Now, here it is sort of presented as if this is two different modes, and you can either do a predictive planning project or you can do an adaptive planning. However, I guess in reality, what happens is that we always need to make a plan. So we always need to have in mind the steps that we're going to take to go from A to B. But at the same time, we need to be, especially now when everything is up in the air, we need to be able to have the ability to change or adjust. So how do you manage change in your organization? Do you always have a set plan and you're saying we're going to go from A to B and we're going to do 1, 2, 3 things? Or do you set up parts of your organization, or maybe processes, maybe PDSA cycles or other types of ways that allow you to be more flexible when you are going through change? Change.
Please feel free to make suggestions, people. Come in with your examples from your own businesses. That would be really helpful.
yeah, maybe like most people, kind of like change happens because it breaks, and then you have to just be reactive rather than proactive sometimes, isn't it, really?
I was just thinking the same, Paul. I was trying to think of examples where we actually planned for change as opposed to reacted to change. And
the
very
wheels
often
fall off and you think, oh,
yeah, but I mean, particularly in our business, it always seems to be more reactive. I think we often talk about the type of planning we want to do to account for change, but I think actually translating that into an actual process, it just never seems to happen. And it is exactly as you said, the wheels fall off and it's like, oh crap, okay, we need to do this and we need to do that, and we just kind of get on with it. It's like planning for it. It seems almost like a luxury in some ways.
Yes, can be. So if you have small agile organizations that can adapt to change, because as you said, change just happens and then you have to adapt to it. Do you have any processes or ways that so these are examples that again are showing predictive planning as separate as adaptive planning. So but the idea is that predictive and adaptive planning always go together, because I imagine even when change happens and you're thinking we need to do this, that's a plan. Maybe it's not a plan that you created before the change, but it's a plan that you're creating as you go along. So do you have any practices like here, for example, the PDSA cycles, Plan, Do, Study, Act, where you go through these quality cycles and you're improving things, or you're just making plans according to the project?
I think for us, it's probably making plans as you go through the project.
Yeah. So so there are different ways when we are designing organizations. We either have processes in there, like, you know, your plans, you know how you make them, you know how you usually react to change. And there's also different tools or ways of having controls in place, or having perhaps groups in place to allow for knowledge to go through the organization. So you're preparing for the change beforehand. So it could be, for example, within a learning organization. It's called a learning organization because it's made for learning and it's made for adapting to changes. You would have at different parts of the organizations, you would have interdepartmental committees, for example, or you would have people, teams getting together and starting to give information or knowledge to the top, perhaps to where the decisions are being made. And no matter how small or large the organization, there still needs to be a kind of a flow of information throughout. So that maybe can help us plan before the change, or can help us be more flexible for it, to adapt to change. Oops. And so the question then arises that how adaptive do we need to be? Because if an organization operates in a stable environment, they don't necessarily need to be adaptive. They can have stable processes throughout and just keep them as they are. But I believe that all organizations now face unstable environments. But please tell me if you have a kind of stability in your environment, or if you think that you have seen organizations that are in a more stable environment. It would be great to hear about it. Or other aspects of stability in your environments, in your organizations.
I don't think we.
Sorry.
Sorry. No,
I was just going to say, if you carry
personally-
on, I was going to suggest that Cara or Diane, because there were social enterprises and it can be
Yeah.
hard to get things. So, you know, I wanted to hear from them, but also you, on your go.
It was really just to say that we are really not in a stable environment being in construction, especially at this financial economic time. In fact, we are probably at the point where we are planning what happens if we go into a recession next year. Then what is our plan? So that's probably how adaptive we are at the minute.
Yes. No, that's that seems quite advanced to already plan for the economic changes that might happen, that we are expecting. Yes, great, thank you. Yes, so the idea here was to say that, you know, how adaptive do you need to be? If you don't need to be adaptive, yes, design only stable processes. But I think all organizations need to be adaptive nowadays. And so we can have a breakout session now to think about how agile your business is and which aspects of the business may benefit from adopting an adaptive planning approach. Is this clear between the planned and the emergent change approach? So what is the plan when we have a plan, or adaptive planning, which is that we can be more flexible and allow for change to happen and then adjust? No. So the difference between the two is that when we have a planned change, we create a plan. This is how I'm going from A to B, and we make our plan and we go and we follow it as it is. But with adaptive planning, we have a general plan, but we allow it to be more flexible. So we have processes like plan, do, study, act cycles within the organization that allow us to perhaps be more flexible and be able to adjust to the change as we go along. So we don't have such a rigid plan. It's still a kind of a plan, but it's not a rigid plan. It's mostly having processes or putting processes in place that will allow us to be flexible enough to move through the change. And these processes could be, as we said, plan to study act cycles, which could be ways of going through what is happening and reflecting on it. Or it could be having or teams and inter-organizational committees or people put in places that are there to coordinate what's happening between the different parts of the organization, and then they can give knowledge to others. So these are the two main ways that we can plan for adaptive planning.
I was thinking of an example when people started their businesses. Originally, they had a business plan. So they would have had a business plan. So you're planning how you want to run your business as it's going along. But business plans change. There are a document that's continually changing, and because you're having to adapt. Some things work, some things don't. You need to maybe target a different sector, or COVID arrived, you had to change the way that you were doing things, maybe stop for a little while, so you need to adapt. So I was thinking everybody will be going through this. They'll have plans that they've got continually, that's progressive plans, and then they'll have adaptive because they're having to make changes as they're going along. So does anyone have any examples to help Eleni with this question?
I think for us, we apply for funding to do a specific thing. We've got a great idea to run I don't know, some kind of club for an older person or something, and then we do it, and then for 6 weeks nobody turns up. But we've agreed we're going to spend the money, you know, we've made this big plan, we've put loads in place. So we kind of, when we are applying for funding, a lot of the time we need to put together a risk list of things that could go wrong, and agree a bit of a time frame of when we will review it and decide, you know what, this actually isn't working. And then what we have done in the past is, with the agreement with the people giving us the money, actually we think this would now be better suited having tried it for 6 weeks or for 3 months. You know, and it does, sometimes it can be difficult because as a business you feel like you're failing and it won't look good on you, but you'd rather after that time period make the change and then make it a success rather than just doing it because you said you were going to do it. So that does happen for us quite a lot, and it is small pots of money, but adapting for us is like absolutely essential because the needs of people change quite a lot, and we just need to kind of put our hands up and say, do you know what, we got that wrong, but here's what else we could try. And luckily we're maybe in a bit of a industry that's okay with that kind of change, being in the third sector. We've not got investors as such. Funders are a wee bit, they want to know their money's being spent well, but as long as it's going to a good social cause still, they're kind of happy.
We're in the same position, exactly. We're the same. We adapt all the time. For example, we just got confirmation that we weren't getting a grant, but to run classes for children with additional support needs, but the organisations that we're dealing with it have directed us to another funding pot, and we are getting it, but we're getting it through another funder, but we have to adapt our plans for it. They want it to cover different groups. So it's worked out really positively for us, but we're going to have to adapt it all. So that happens to us all the time, as Cara says. Being in the third sector, you've got to be adaptive. We still have our business plans, and we work towards that. We know what we're working towards, but things crop up all the time. And another thing like SQA has just suddenly popped out, and we're looking at developing that as well. So yeah, so we're the same.
Thank you. And can I ask, because I understand I'm talking to people with entrepreneurial organizations that are agile, as you said, your change for you is an everyday thing. What do you think helps you adapt so fast, so easily? Where do, for example, are decisions taken in a way that makes this easier? What do you think makes you adapt so easily and so flexibly?
I suppose we're quite a small organisation, so there's only myself. I've just got a music development coordinator. So usually it's between the two of us and our staff. We've got 3 other staff do admin. So I think because we're a small organisation and we're kind of quite tight, we, work well together. So it's easier to do that. I think it would be harder in a bigger organisation.
Yeah.
I think you've got to have the right, for us as well, it's the right people that are okay with change. I don't know why the world fears change sometimes, but just like if something goes wrong, like there's some people that just can't navigate into a different project. But I think having the right team, talking, communicating to them, training them in the right way to say you're in a job that will change all the time, and then being along with you on the journey, and kind of being okay with change. I've sometimes found some staff members have found it really difficult, and then that makes your job, as well as the business need changing, you've got to kind of handhold people through change. So that has been really, really difficult in the past. But if you've got good people that are willing to adapt, then it does help.
Yes, thank you. And culture always goes together with structure, in the sense that you might have the best structure ever, but if in your organization change is not a good thing, or is not considered a good thing in the core values of the organization, then it's not going to happen. Yes, yeah, very important. Thank you. And also where the decisions are being made, like Diane said, a small organization, the decisions, people work well together, the decisions are being made at the same point, so it's easy and flexible to move forward. Should we move to organizational structure now, which is the big bulk of what we're doing? So when we're talking about structure, so the basic characteristics of an organization would be in terms of specialization, formalization of work, hierarchies, span of control, and the world is sort of changing. I know that you are from entrepreneurial organizations that are flexible and adaptable, but even larger organizations now are changing to create smaller, more flexible structures within the organization. We will see how this happens. But just to prepare for this, can I show you this? And please just jot down your scoring in a piece of paper if you have in front of you or in your computer. And then we can discuss it as we go through each one of those. So formalization is when we have few rules or many written rules. And specialization is when we have overlapping tasks or separate tasks and roles. Hierarchy is flatter hierarchy, smaller, or tall hierarchy, too many layers. The technology could be, is this a product, is this a service, what kind of business, what is our focus? The culture could be that we have ambiguous norms and values, or clear norms and values. Professionalism could be low professional training or high professional training. And then the goals would be well-defined goals or not defined goals, the size small or large, and the organizational mindset could be either is it a mechanical system or a biological system. So for example, Diane's organization that is very flexible would be a biological system. It's one person working more like an organism rather than working as a machine with a lot of defined systems and rules and regulations.
Sorry, can you explain the difference between mechanical system and biological system?
Yes. So when we talk about organization, sometimes there is this metaphor of a machine. So an organization that runs with specific rules and processes. And then, or it's also the metaphor of an organism. And then we have an organization that is more flexible. There's not that many rules about who makes decisions or what is happening in the organization. It's more organic. There are not so many reporting lines. Perhaps it's more of a flat hierarchy when you have a biological system. So it's a more organic organization rather than a machine type organization. So then once you have these just scored, we can go through work specialization. And this is how we divide the work into separate jobs. Is there work specialization, high work specialization in your organization, or not so much? Can everyone do the same, do everything in your organization? So would you have people that are highly specialized in one thing, or can, let's say, one person be sick for a day and then someone else takes over easily?
Yeah, we because we're such a small company, but the processes we do are highly skilled. There tends to be people that are that's their job, but we try to have everyone trained up so that they can at least cover or do 90% of it. If someone's off ill or off on holiday and things, so I think that's really important that people can step in, and it's good for people's careers to learn other techniques and procedures.
Yes, definitely. And then this is they call it T people versus I people, because, as the T is like this, the vertical line is the depth of specialization, and the part of the T, the top bit, the horizontal part, is the breadth. So maybe they can do other things, as you said, and that's good for the organization. And the I people are those who are only specialized, so it's the depth of specialization, but not really breadth. So the idea is, as Eric said, to have more T people in the organization, have people who can have both the high specialization, but also are able to do other things, and the organization then becomes more agile. And this can, of course, be trainable. Yes, here we are about the T-shaped people, and then we're looking also at cross-functional teams. Do you have separate teams in your organization? Do they work together? Are they highly specialized?
We're in the construction industry as well, so we would have specialized subcontractors that we would call in. So the actual business is joiners and builders, but then we would have specialized plumbers, tilers, plasterers that would come in, that kind of thing, just to pull it all together, and we would project manage it just to make sure that we've got different people in at the right times.
Yes, great. And with having the different specializations, does this make your life easier or more difficult as managing all this?
It makes it easier because we've got a team that we've used for quite a few years now. So if we've got a big project on, we know that they're really reliable, and we know that because we give them a lot of work, they'll slot in where we need them to, whereas it could be more difficult if you were just randomly phoning up a plumber that you hadn't used before. But because we've got a good working relationship with them and we know that they're good, and sometimes we pay a bit more because we know how reliable they are, so it does work pretty well for us.
Great, thank you. And then we're moving on to the different types of organization. So do you have an organizational chart, or you don't need one in your organizations? If of course you are a few people or a consultancy, usually it's a flat hierarchy, but do you have a kind of an organizational chart? Do you use one? Do you need one?
Well, we definitely have one, but it's a relatively narrow one. It's a relatively short one. Certainly, anytime we go for a tender, they do like to see an organizational chart because it gives them a breakdown of our staff in terms of how many people we have in each of the business areas. So yeah, we definitely have one.
Yeah, thank you. So what usually Knights and Wilmot say is that organization charts are political symbols. So this means that an organizational design is not always a well-planned, rational process where we say, again, this is the president here, John Wayne, as it says, I don't know, the production manager and all of that. But it's a political process where, you know, the agendas and the interests of the organization are continuously negotiated. So this creates compromise perhaps in the organization, but also might create a situation where someone might be, as you can see here, someone might be, I don't know, in a high position of the organization or in a relatively down the line position, but they might have higher or lower power, or they might be decorative in a certain position. So organization charts don't always show the actual reality of the organization. Is this something that you've seen, or you think that your organization, actually your chart depicts the reality?
We're still at a stage of growth where there's really only 3 managers at the minute. And so for something as big as this, it's not to say that we don't need it as yet, but as we continue to grow, that's something that we hope that we can employ. It's just finding the right timing for us. It's all about timing, when we're aware of who we need to bring in, but due to financial and work coming up next year, we hope to employ more operations managers, but until we get there, it's just everybody spinning the plates at the minute.
We've got a kind of organizational chart as part of our ISO 9001, but it's kind of laid out more like, so the headings are administration, management review, staff training, purchasing, inquiries, control of manufacturer problems, internal audits. And then that kind of goes down the side, then across the top is the people within the company. And then it basically says if they're responsible for that, or they're compliant for it, or if it doesn't apply to them. So it's not really a kind of managerial chart. It's more a kind of who's responsible and who's qualified for different aspects of the company. I guess that follows that we're quite flat, kind of a flat organization.
So it doesn't show reporting lines like this one. It shows who's responsible for what. Yes. So it could be more either a matrix or, but what you mentioned, the types that you mentioned is a functional. So in functional, you would have HR, marketing, I don't know, manufacturing and all of this. And then the divisional, usually organizations have a functional at the top, and then underneath you have divisional, which could be either a product group or it could be a customer group. For example, Nike would have a division of women's athletics or something like this. So either divisions are either according to customer group or according to product group. So here it's more a functional. As you can see, it's production, HR, and then payroll, assistant manager. So it all goes according to function rather than a division. And then in terms of hierarchy and agility, the idea is that the flatter the hierarchy, the better the agility. And then information and decision making flows downwards, usually in hierarchies. But if you invert the hierarchy, it can be a support structure. Do you think that inverted hierarchies work? Do you have a kind of a hierarchy in your organizations? I assume there's always a kind of a hierarchy, but have you tried anything like inverting the hierarchy? Meaning that information flows from the bottom up rather than from the top down, or decisions perhaps.
We're really client driven, so we do product, we're kind of service, and we're manufacturing, but it's a service manufacturing. So it really kind of, any external stuff is kind of definitely top down. So it'd be client to me to everyone else. Internal projects, if we're doing something new, we're trying to develop a new process or something, then it's definitely everyone kind of pitches in, and you know, whoever's got the best idea, and that's fine.
Yes, great, thank you. So it is a kind of a, well, it is agile in the sense that it's a sort of a flat hierarchy, as I understand it, because you said before also it's not reporting lines, it's that everyone has their own part to play, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, ultimately everyone reports to me, so it's flat with a cherry on the top.
Yes, you would have a very nice image for your organization plan with the cherry. And I think Karen, sorry, did you turn on your mic or no? No. Okay, sorry. I just saw you pop up in my screen. That's why.
I was thinking it was like a Belgian bun.
And it's almost 2 o'clock, Jane. Time to mention Belgian buns. And then we're moving to span of control. Oh, sorry, before I move on to span of control, first of all, to remind you about the workbook. So the first exercise that we're doing in the workbook is has to do with all of these things, but would you need some time today? I'm asking because I would need to plan some time to perhaps have a look and start looking at your workbook, or you're going to do it with your team on Thursday?
We can do the workbooks at the peer group.
Okay,
So
great.
people are able to come to the peer group, we can have a look at the workbooks then, and I'll send out an email summary of them as I've been doing as well, so people know what's in them. But it's up to you, Elaine, if you want to have a look at it. Make a start. It's up to you what you want to do.
No, thank you. We won't spend time on it. We can just have a look at it and see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we don't need to spend time on it. So is it time now then to have a small break, perhaps 10 minutes? Yeah, great. Thank you.
That's fine.
See you at
10-minute break, then people see you back in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Hello, just wait for everybody else to join us again.
So let's talk about span of control. So the span of control is how many people does one person have reporting to them. So for example, before Eric was saying that all these people report to him, and this might, for example, might create a lot of information for him. Perhaps it could create overload of decisions or overload of things to do, perhaps. So is this, I understand that depending on the organization, there's the different types of structures, but do you have people with different spans of control in your organization? So people who have, I don't know, 4 people reporting to them and others who might have 1 or less, but they are being at the same level. And how does this work for you?
Again, I think probably because we've got such a small and flat structure, it's only got about, 4 people that kind of like are sitting in the middle layer, and then 1 that sits above, and then everybody kind of like reports into 2 people. So it is really flat for us.
Yeah. And it works in the sense that everyone reporting to two people in this way works because you're all highly specialized professionals, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's how it works in. I think you said you're a consultancy. In consultancies, clinic made up from when it's professionals, highly specialized professionals getting together into an organization. Then there's not so much need for long reporting lines or different spans of control between people, and so because everyone is an expert in their field, I imagine, and they do their work as it is. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we should be able to have the same in universities because we're all supposedly experts in our fields, but we don't have it because universities are very traditional, highly hierarchical organizations. So unfortunately, we don't have that. But yes, this is how it usually works. Any other ideas? I don't know if Eric is back. Would you like to tell us how is it for everyone reporting to you and how do you manage? Hi, Eric. I was asking whether it's easy, whether you have a backlog of things to do because everyone reports to you, as you said before, and how does this work for you on your workload mostly?
Yeah. The way it's kind of changed over the last few years, and we've got a kind of big project, which has kind of meant we've got some staff basically working off site now, so we've kind of contracted here at the main site, and so basically everyone does kind of report directly to me. So that can be quite challenging because you've got to kind of juggle a lot of things. What I try and do is get people trained up as best they can and quickly as possible, that they can make their own decisions, so they can reduce the amount of time they kind of need to come back to me, and the frequency of questions and things. So that's kind of it kind of moves a little bit. Taken on a couple of interns just now, so that's massively increased the amount of back and forth.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I think this is what we need to take from the span of control, is that the more span of control they hire or more people reporting, then it creates a lot of workload for the person to whom they report. And the flatter the hierarchy, of course, the more agile the organization. Oops, why it's not moving? Yeah. And then, so yes, as it says here, it's more about the support rather than about the control. So it is control reporting lines. Yes, when we're talking about organization charts, we're talking about reporting lines. But in this situation, and within organizations that are more entrepreneurial, as you are, it's mostly this idea of supporting rather than controlling. And especially because you have specialized people in most of the organizations that you're in. So for organizations and for groups or teams that need a lot of support or a lot of attention, or there's a lot of work, there might need to be a smaller span of control. So people having less people reporting to them and people being responsible for less people so that they can support them more easily when the organization changes. That's why we're talking about agility. Now this is it's called a team-based structure, or we could call it a divisional structure. And this could be either according to project, this could be according to, I don't know, product line, or it could be according to geography. It could be anything. I assume that you would have team-based structures in some of the organizations that you're in. Yeah. Does anyone work with this type of structure? Well, it's mostly divisional. And how does it work? I mean, does it work well for the organization, or?
Ours is smaller again. We have a construction and building director and also a foundations and civils director. So although they are both directors in the company and sit at the top, they both have their own substructures as such underneath. They both have their own staff that work for them and with them. that's so we would probably split ours into two at the minute.
Yeah, two divisions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you're in construction. Yes, of course, that would obviously work well. Yes. And in terms of sorry. Yeah. So this creates it involves high coordination between the teams, but it can also, it's more customer oriented. And I think you said before that we are quite customer oriented. So in this structure, it's more customer oriented. It might not have the kind of functional before, as let's say, or focusing on one specific function, but it does have all this group focusing on one specific customer, and then it creates this orientation to the customer.
Karen, what about with your business? Because you've got a London office as well. So how does it work with your team structures?
So basically we've got Absolute Workspace, which is the main company, and then we've got like two other divisions with a possible third in the next few months. But basically everybody still reports to the one managing director. It's not like team structures. So it's still the one managing director at the top. And then it then branches out into, like, you've got a head of each division from there. But it's not team-based like that one that you just shown. It is still the one structure reporting to the managing director overall.
Yes. So it's more functional, let's say, HR, marketing, production, Yeah, thank you. Yes, and so this allows for economies of scale mostly. So in that sense, yes, the functional works well, so that you create a specialization within HR, within marketing, within production, as you go along. Yes, thank you. And so this is a matrix structure, and what it has is a combination between the functional and the divisional. So as you can see here, you need, for this type of structure to work, you need two different outputs, and you need the need to share resources. So in this situation, for example, you have the product line, and the different products here on the vertical, and then you have the department or the process. Or you could have, for example, the function, you could have, again, HR, marketing, and then on the horizontal, you could have the different projects. And as the projects go along, you would have one person from finance, one person from HR, one person from marketing, one person from production, that they are responsible. And what this is good for is that people can move the different nodes. So where the yellow and the green lines get together, you have one person, but this person can move from this node to the other node to the other node according to project. The problem with this, though, is that it becomes too stressful and it requires constant training for people to be able to work with different reporting lines all the time. It creates issues of the person, let's say in the first node, would have to report to the GNOME's manager, production manager, and also to the person responsible to the head of supplies. So then where is the priority, and who decides what the person is going to do? Or if later on someone else needs this person, perhaps the head of manufacturing needs this person to move to the next node, what happens to the person? So in that sense, it is quite a complex structure that requires a lot of training and requires teams that are experienced enough to be able to deal with all this stress, let's say, of reporting to different people at the same time, or moving between projects and needing to report to different people. So do you see, apart the confusion, the frustration of this chart, do you see anything that would be good, that would work well within a matrix, or something that perhaps would not work well within a matrix organization? For example, where would decisions be made here? can't even envision this for your own organization. It's too complex, right? I assume it is. So yes, matrices are. I don't think there's any organization that is a matrix on its own. Matrices only happen within projects, within specific parts of larger organizations. So it's not one organization that would be a matrix. It is quite useful in times of crisis like now, let's say, because you share resources. But the amount of time that's required to coordinate it, and the amount of frustration that it leads to for people moving projects and reporting to different people at the same time, might worth it or might not worth it. It depends on the project and the products that are the organization, or where the organization is. So very important type of structure, useful to know. If it doesn't work for your organization, it doesn't. And so, yes, as we said, in the matrix structure, the strengths are that it can achieve coordination to meet the dual demands, and then it's good for complex decisions, unstable environments, and also times of crisis, again, because you would be sharing resources. You share people and resources across the different teams, across projects. So in that sense, it is useful. But the weaknesses are, again, the confusion, the frustration, mainly having to report to different people and requiring continuous training so that people can be flexible enough to work well within a matrix. So if you want more, so there is a trend now. A lot of traditional organizations moving from more traditional types of organizations into more flexible organic organizations. And most of your organizations are this new idea that is happening elsewhere as well, of more flexible organizations, more focused towards organizing humans, let's say, and here Hamel calls it humanocracy, rather than the typical traditional organization focused on the hierarchy. And whether we want it or not, the world is changing, even though we still see organizations being highly hierarchical, and we're going to keep seeing this because organizations might need hierarchies as they grow. The form that is the one that is becoming most prominent slowly everywhere and in the market is this form of a smaller, more agile and more organic organization. And then so there are ways for organizations to become more agile or become more flexible without increasing in size or without increasing the bureaucracy or red tape. For example, there is a system that's called the Office of the Future. A lot of organizations outsource things. So there's a system in Pfizer that's called the Office of the Future, and individual employees can have the chance to outsource tasks that they might not otherwise been able to. That would take time from their being focused on innovation. So organizations, as we said, are becoming more agile, more having to focus on innovation because the environment is more critical and more challenging, and that's why the organizations need to find ways to become more adaptive to this. And I've put here you will get these slides at the end. I've put here a link to Hamel's Reinventing Management project, which is all about creating organizations that are more agile. And you can go in, you can put in your ideas, you can put perhaps questions for the group. And it has a lot of new ideas that might not work for everyone's organization, but you never know when an idea will come from. So that's a good platform to just go and see new ideas about management. And so this kind of structure that a lot of organizations are moving towards is called a lattice structure. And this is the kind of structure that probably some of you are working in. And this is organizations they're being called otherwise bossless structures or bossless organization, where there is mostly self-directed teams within the organization. And so you would have the absence of assigned authority, and then you would choose projects that everyone is interested to work in, and people would choose their projects and they would work in these projects on their own. So this is usually when the focus of the organization is innovation. I will show you an example of an organization here, which is in the video game industry, and they have 400 employees, but they don't have managers. So what happens is that the employees decide to choose their own projects and get together and work in that. And if a project doesn't attract a lot of employees, then it's not considered that it's worth it, because if people don't want to work in it, probably it won't be good for the customers either. And so the employees are involved in hiring, reward, and termination. And it requires to have professionals, specialized professionals. Usually everyone knows their work there. They don't need a lot of direction. And this is just here one organization, but a lot of organizations like this are springing up everywhere. There's also an organization in the US that makes canned tomatoes called Morningstar. And they have, I think, 1,000 employees, and they have no bosses. And manufacturing sounds much more difficult to run without bosses than the video game industry, where you have people getting together and developing games. So to go back to this, it's a great type of structure, but Dunbar's number is 150. So the number where humans, like people, can get together, where everyone knows everyone else, and there can be one community and they can be still effective, is 150. So the idea is that you cannot have a bigger group, self-directed group, than more than 150. So in this sense, when you have lattice structures, which again, a lot of your organizations, I imagine, have or might move towards lattice structures, would be this idea of being able to have a number that can be self-directed within this. Because when we talk about self-directed teams, it's all these ideas about empowerment and allowing people to work with their own responsibility. The criticism here is whether we give them more responsibility, and we think that we empower them, but we don't give them more remuneration or job security. So this is something to think about. Where is the balance with this? Yes, it's great to have self-directed teams, but self-direction means also responsibility. It means risk. And therefore, it would need to have the necessary reward at the same time. And so there was a research of an organization, WL Gore. You probably know them from this Gore material and Gore-Tex and all of this in the fabrics for trekking and things, clothes. So they consider themselves a 4,500 member improvisational jazz group. So they think that they need to get together and work in concerted ways. And it does work with self-directed teams, semi-autonomous group teams. The owners, when they developed it, they just wanted teams to work self-directedly. They didn't want to manage as such. They want to create the organization and help it grow, but not. So ever since it started, it has been working in this way. And problem solving happens within the teams themselves, and it happens within this group self-directed way. And they consider that they learn in this way. So, however, the problem with this, it's great to have self-directed teams, and it's great to develop self-directed teams. But the idea of moving control from management to the team means that the team member has to self-regulate. So the criticism here is that within self-regulated work teams, and this was a research that Parker did in telecommunication industry, people who were developing hardware for telecommunications, the self-directed teams, actually the team control was much stronger than the control that would be exerted by management. And even though this sounds great, it sort of created a more tight control, a tighter iron cage. Weber called bureaucracy the iron cage of bureaucracy, because we are locked in our own prison of rules and procedures. So in this sense, the team itself created such a big control over the other team members that it was much more restrictive than it would have been with the more traditional management control. So this shows that these ideas about self-directed teams are great, but when we're thinking about people and when we're thinking about our organizations, we need to think about how the team exercises control and how people behave and how free they are within this group structure, let's say. Do you have any ideas about this? Do you work as a team? Do you work as a self-directed team? Who has the control in your organization? Do you have control of your own work?
Paula and Brian, you're probably the most similar to this.
Yeah, I guess we do. You know, on the basis that kind of like, obviously, if you're assigned to a project, we're not quite as you know, people get to choose which project that they're on, and to make it attractive, it's kind of like, no, there is a project, and this is the people that's kind of like going on to it, and then they obviously would then focus on the tasks that they're more specialised in, you know, in the area. I suppose coming from an old-fashioned traditional model, that kind of like lattice thing kind of like makes me kind of like give me the heebie-jeebies, because you're thinking, oh my God, how many people just disappear into the abyss and into a cupboard and come out when they've ready to retire, and you've not actually done any work in the meantime. But as I say, I guess that's just an old-fashioned idea. So yeah, as I say, I can see that it would work for some organizations, and I can see, you know, if it was like the gaming people, you know, and kind of like attract them to it and stuff like that, and have them as very specialized people. But I would worry that, you know, for some, you know, where they were kind of like trying to kind of like encourage and teach younger members of the teams to get to that point in time, that they could get lost or left behind. And even I think we've probably all got experience of that over COVID, that you sort of think, you know, I know of teams that we work with that anybody that was new into it and stuff like that were just left to their own devices, and nobody gave them direction. And it's, yeah, I think that's going to come back and bite us as a society on the butt in a couple of years' time. So,
yeah. Yes, thank you. And I have the same idea that, you know, usually when you have a team, there's people who are actually
mentoring you, and guiding you.
Yes, or you would have a team where if there's no control, then some people would not work.
Yes.
But actually, what Barker's research has found, and other researchers is also keep finding other papers, is that the concerted control, the control that is being exerted by the team, sometimes it's even stricter. And that's really interesting to see that, you know, because we're being paid according to the project, we're not letting anyone not work. But it's, again, it's a complex thing to develop, and it's complex with remuneration as well, because how do you reward a self-directed team?
Yeah.
And so, yes, again, the weaknesses here is, as we said, the unplanned decentralization, and it needs continuous training so that people can adapt to this and they can self-direct. And also it requires these employees who are entrepreneurs. So it requires people who are very motivated and they do want the business to go ahead, whereas you can't have it in all the industries or in all types of professions or work in this situation. And then higher responsibility, if it's not rewarded with higher remuneration or job security, then of course you train people for them to leave. So this is what usually happens in these organizations when it's video games, or it happened with Zappos, the organization, you know, the company that sells shoes. People become trained within this very well because of the self-directed thing helps people develop, but then they might leave and you might end up losing good people very easily. And or the organization might move to a new stage and the structure falls apart. So many organizations then tend to use a hybrid structure that combines the characteristics of different structures. And then you would have the most common one is that you would have a functional at the top, so HR, marketing, manufacturing, and so on, and then a divisional below. So below that, you would have your different divisions, like a product group or a project group, depending on what your focus is, or a customer group. Now let's move to centralization versus decentralization. So the image with the bees here is because bees and other insects work autonomously, in the sense that they don't need so much direction in order to do their work. And also bees, they do this little dance before they go into the hive, which is they transfer information through this dance. This is a way of transferring information throughout the organization. So how centralized are you? I imagine Eric's example, sorry that I'm talking on behalf of you, Eric, but because you gave us a clear idea of your structure, it's quite centralized. Everything comes through you, right?
Yeah, that's definitely the downside of where we are just now, is that, you know, everything is through me, so it's very centralized, and everything is dependent on me. So technically, you know, things in the lab, you know, we train people up as much as possible, but certainly interacting with clients and kind of looking at the larger kind of strategy of driving client projects forward tends to come down to me.
Yes, thank you. And I imagine Paul, as an organization, is less centralized.
Yeah, I think well, to a certain extent, maybe a little bit of both. So centralized in the fact that obviously there's somebody kind of like overseeing what projects that we have, but then when everybody gets assigned onto projects, then it's decentralized in the fact that like there's a project manager, and effectively they're all kind of like little worker bees, all kind of like going off and doing their own little bit of it, and making sure that they obviously collectively get together every now and then to make sure that, you know, everything that they do, you know, kind of interacts with what everybody else is doing. So, so like a little bit of both, but probably more towards the decentralization.
Yes.
Would you agree, Brian?
Yeah, 100%. I was just going to say that. I mean, obviously, as people get assigned to the projects, they go off, and each individual project almost becomes its own little mini company for the duration of the contract. So all the decision making happens at that level, obviously with an overarching view from ourselves on it. But each project gets run in not quite isolation, but gets run in its own right. And as a result, they make the decisions that they need to specifically for that project to get it done. So yeah, it is definitely a bit of both. Definitely leaning more towards decentralization, but it's a needs-driven thing rather than an organizational design thing. We just the needs of the project outweigh everything, really. Yeah.
So when you say needs, you mean that the decisions are being made based on the need in the moment, or?
Yeah, well, the needs at the moment, but also the needs of the project,
Of the customer, yeah.
of the customer. Yeah. So sort of rather than an overarching, as I said, organizational or company needs, it's more so that a team of people have been assigned to a project, and the customer's requirements take priority, and making sure the project is delivered, you know, as efficiently as possible and within budget and all the rest of it. So as a consequence, I think most of the projects have the autonomy to make the right decisions in terms of who's doing what and when and all the rest of it, in line with the project plan that would have been agreed with the customer.
Yeah. So I imagine then there's no clear rule in the organization where they have to return back to whoever they report to, or what kinds of decisions they take. The decisions that are being made within the project are defined by the project manager, says that we're going to make this decision ourselves, or they can say, let's go back to the organization and ask if we're allowed to do this.
Mostly it would be like by the decision, the collective decision by whomever's assigned onto that particular project, and then overseen by the project manager, because there will be some projects where depending on the size of it, there might actually only be 1 or 2 individuals and no project manager, and so then they really do have full autonomy to make sure that whatever the client requires, that's what the client gets effectively, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, great. Thank you. So I understand that. So it depends on the group. It could be a group without a project manager. It is completely self-autonomous and is according to the customer.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And those of you who work in construction, where does the centralization, decentralization work, and how does it work? Because obviously you're not always on site.
Because
sorry, on you go. You go. I don't really
I just say
we're
so this myself and my husband's the other director. He is on site a lot of the time. But if he's not going to be on site, then he would still go to the job in the morning, outline everything that needs done. Because we've got quite a few apprentices, so they do need a lot of guidance. So then they would have a clear idea of what needs done, and if there's anything they're not sure of, they would go back to him. So we're very much centralized. Ideally, if we could get like a foreman role to come in between the two, but that's something we've struggled to do. That's something I think would help us to grow if we got somebody more in that role. But it is very much left on my husband.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So basically management is on site in that case. Yep.
Yeah.
And Angelina.
Hi, sorry. We're in the process of working with a strategy consultant at the minute, and we're actually putting in our hierarchy as such. We're still very much at that process in our business. And it's interesting. It is interesting. I didn't know there were so many job roles descriptions out there. But like what Jill said, it's my husband that's the construction manager as well, and it was him and Thomas, who's the landscaping director, teamed up, opened the company. They're the directors. However, Thomas isn't as skilled as Barry on working in big projects, even though he's the director of the company. So Barry does mentor Thomas to a certain extent, because there is a need for more building. Our target market is more building and construction rather than landscaping at the minute. It hasn't always been that way. We've adapted. So he's now mentoring the other director as such, so that we can have these 2 divisions of building contractors going, rather than landscaping might change in our business. We might not be doing that as much in the future. Whereas for myself, I'm more, here's the jobs. Do we want them? They make the decisions whether we're going to go for these or not. And then, so again, it's but like what Jill said, we've got a lot of apprentices as well. So we're trying to just build that team at the minute, very much so.
And what you said, it's interesting, the dynamic, the 2 directors at the same side. So an organizational chart would have them at the same level, but actually one is a mentor of the other.
Yeah.
So again, this idea, Knights and Wilmot, it's a political issue. So political, not as in politics, but political as in a negotiation of where is the decision making there. So that's very interesting space to be at the moment.
Very.
So we've got the managing director at the top, and we've then got a construction director, and then our project managers, site managers, and labourers will all report to the construction director, who then reports to the managing director. That's how ours operates.
And so it follows the hierarchy, so quite a tall hierarchy in that sense. And you said that you have one hierarchy, no groups. Yes, great, thank you. So yes, in this sense, then, as the organization changes and grows in all organizations, then decentralization and centralization, where the decisions are being made, can change from moment to moment. It doesn't mean how the organizational chart looks. It can look in a certain way, but then the decision making might change from one point to the other. So for example, recently for us, we would have to approve expenses at the level of head of division, and now it has gone at the level of unit lead, which is below this, for practical reasons. So these things tend to change for practical reasons as the organization moves along, and again, and how it works better for the organization. Otherwise, it does create problems. So before we go into diversity, can we look a bit at your at the workbook? Let me see if I can try to share the workbook. Share, where's the workbook? Okay. I'm sorry, I can't share your workbook because it doesn't show in my, here it is. So the first question, your workbook will ask you to draw your organization. So I imagine, do you feel that you will know how to do this now? Yeah, great, thanks. And then areas to address, top 3 actions, and then how you will achieve them. Is this something that you can start thinking about? Just to get you thinking about this. And the second one is centralization. So how much centralization is there? Are decisions made in the more sensible place? And could it be decentralized more? And what would need to happen to ensure this was effective? It might not be need to be more decentralized, or it might need to be decentralized. That's something for you to think about your organization. And again, areas to consider actions and how you will achieve these. And then we will go to formalization a bit later. Let me go back into my...
I'm just thinking as well, your structure might change, you know, as you're going along. You're doing this course, it's help to grow. So you're looking at growing your business, and in the future, the structure that you have right now might change. People might leave, you might take on new people, new responsibilities. So again, it's something that you might restructure, you know, you might change your structure as you're going along. So whereas it might not apply to you just now, it might apply to you in the future. Just to bear that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. So if we go back to this, where you had to rate your organization, if we go through all of these, would you like to say what you have there? Is it like a straight line, everything is at 6, for example, or does it move? Typically, if we were in a classroom, I would ask you to interview each other and maybe see where your lines interact. But can you tell us a bit more about where you are and whether this made you think about where you need to be? It doesn't have to be a certain shape, it's just an observation.
I'll contribute for the first time today, if that's all right. Basically, numbered 1 to 9, from my point of view, our kind of existing scoring would typically be between 4 and 7, kind of right down the list.
Yeah, thank you. And is there something that made you think about, oh, this is really where we are, or I couldn't really place us here?
I found it quite easy to pick a number for each of the segments, but as you've been discussing stuff since we first looked at this, I'd probably slightly change a couple of them now that I understand a wee bit more about it. So,
yeah. Is there anyone in particular that, if you want to tell us, if you don't want to tell us, that's fine, of course.
No, there's just a couple. I don't think there's anything in particular, or nothing that would be drastic anyway. So
yes, yeah. So between 4 and 7, somewhere in the middle, going a bit like this. Great, thank you. Anyone else?
interestingly enough, and while we were doing it, I'd like totaled mine up to be 53, and I'd asked Brian separately what his came out at, given the fact that we're in the same organization, and he came out at 56. So I was like thinking, well, at least our thought processes between what we're kind of like doing is not that different. It would have been a bit crazy if we would have been wildly off. But obviously we haven't compared what we had for each of the individual scores. But as I say, yeah, that might be something that we'll look at separately, Brian.
Yes, this is very interesting. That's great. But great that you are both on the same line of thinking.
Well, thankfully we are both on the same line of thinking. Otherwise, one is in a different organization, maybe.
Well, it's not rare for people to have different ideas about their organization. So, yeah, anyone else?
I think for me, we were mostly down the left-hand side. We've got standard operating procedures and kind of clearly defined what we need to do. But what I did wonder is, if I give this to the the guys in the lab, if they would answer it the same as me, and or where they might differ. So I think that might be quite a eye-opening procedure.
Yeah, I can put this in a Word file if you want separately, so that you don't just have it in a slides. But you said you're in manufacturing, right? So yes, obviously you would be more towards this side rather than the other, and of course I imagine Paula's organization, then it's more towards the other side, because then it's this idea that mechanistic versus organic organization. So of course there would be different parts. Yes, great. So is there any one of these that we need to discuss more? No. Okay.
I personally, sorry, just was going to go on to the one about culture.
Yeah.
Norms and values. I find that a hard one to test in the society that we have at the minute, especially working with a lot of young people. You might have your clear expectations and values as a company and try and include them in that culture when setting out the visions, values. But how do you really assess that and test that all the time? It's difficult.
And it's what you were saying before, that people who think that change is good, if this is at the core of the organization, then this is part of the culture. But then, yeah, if you're dealing with a lot of new people, young people, people who are not perhaps haven't worked, are not very experienced, yeah, that's very difficult. And culture goes hand in hand with the structure. Where was I? Okay, yes. So then with decision making, I guess this is pretty straightforward nowadays, that if we keep hiring the same person, then we keep making the same decisions, and that's not very good in a highly volatile environment. We need to have different ideas and to create channels for different ideas to arise in the organization, so that then not only can we respond to our customers better, but also we have a wider perspective rather than just the perspective of the same person being hired 50 times. And there is the biggest case on this is what happened with Barings Bank and Nick Leeson. I don't know if you have ever heard of this scandal. Yes, you have. Great. And so there is a movie, Rogue Trader, that I think you can see it for free now on YouTube, which is also very interesting to see how he actually was allowed to go rogue within a bank that was a very traditional bank with a lot of points of decision making and points of checks and points of quality control. How could he go crazy and deal with money that he didn't have? And this is because he was, first of all, a charismatic person, but also he was the same kind of person that they tended to recruit. They were all from the same background, the same, I don't know, schools, the same So it was the same person working in this bank 1,000 times over, and that was what created the collapse of the bank. And there's also a lot of analysis, and if you're interested, I can give you papers about Enron going wrong in the same way. So there is something to be said about the business case of diversity, not because it's good for the world, but there is a business case for diversity. And then this is an example, for example, for an organization where it was mostly men running the organization, and a woman comes in and realizes that a lot of the perhaps the problems within the organization could have been because it was in an all-male senior leadership team. And again, we have seen this again and again in research, and mostly in male-dominated organizations. For example, investment banks tend to have this kind of used to have a lot of these problems. So let's look a bit at formalization. So this is written rules, operating procedures, job descriptions, and all of this. And when we have these kinds of questions, we are asking about whether do you have a job description in your organization? Do you have manuals? Do you have charts? Is this something that you have high formalization in your organization?
We're just setting up policies at the minute, more especially for when we're going for bids as well. We need to ensure that we have these policies to hand. So from that point of view, but we don't really have one. It's given me an idea to do one for probably job descriptions. And especially we did do a little bit about employment law as well, and just to make sure that everybody's on board and is aware of their job descriptions as well. So I think for, especially if you are growing as a company, it's important probably to have that and everyone is clear of their descriptions as well.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. No, I was going to say we don't have we've got policies and procedures because obviously we need to have for GDPR, Cyber Essential, etc. But we don't have actual job descriptions because, to be honest with you, we probably all have the same job description. So
yeah, that would be required if you had different specializations within the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I assume I was thinking also about Angela in construction that if you have projects, for example, with the public sector at some point, you would need to add. I know of construction companies that have started to have Oracle, that they had to put Oracle in, which is a big problem because through Oracle you have to take 3 quotes for everything that you buy. You can just go out and buy something that you might need on the spot in the site. So yes, formalization is could be a big issue for construction companies. Anyone else?
I think we've actually just looked at bringing in a more formal team communication procedure. Just since COVID, we're now fully hybrid working, but kind of people are kind of WhatsApping, like kind of Scottish Government-esque. We're WhatsApping, we're Teamsing, we're emailing, we're calling. And the team, it's causing a bit of friction within the team because people are saying, I don't know what kind of message should be where. So we're going to have to write up some kind of formal agreed team communication, like why you would use Teams, why you would use email or give someone a phone call, just because everyone's getting a bit confused and a bit stressed at each other, and that's kind of unnecessary. So that's something new that's came up that we never thought we'd ever have to formalise, but hybrid working is just making things a bit more difficult.
Oh, this is amazing because it's we need to do this here as well. Otherwise, you get I don't know how many emails from students. Yeah, that's great.
Cara, sorry to jump in. We did actually the same last year as well because I felt as though when I was coming in, something said to me about these WhatsApps and sending things and all these different groups, and I had suggested that we find something else as well, and we just started using the Gmail chat. I don't know if you have that. That's instead of WhatsApp, but it just flashes up like a WhatsApp on your phone or your device or whatever it is that you're on as well. So, but it's just to make it more formal.
No, I think it's that. You totally need that because I was just watching, I don't know if anyone watches the US Office, but there's a bit in it and the guy makes a brand called Woof, and at the same time you get a message by fax, email, phone call, Facebook, and that's a bit what it feels like in the work now because people are like, I'll just cover every base.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to know if that has helped you. I would definitely be doing that.
That's great, very much needed. When you make these rules, can you please share them with us, because we need to have something here. So formalization, yes, obviously in agile environments, you would need to have less formalization, but sometimes you need it to make your life easier, even to be even more agile, because as you said, communication can become too hectic. So this is, it's not very clear cut. And here's the example of Timpson, and Sir John Timpson says that the only way ahead is to trust the people who serve customers with the freedom to treat them however they wish. We have an upside down management structure with a chief executive officer at the bottom. I'm not sure about that, because I still think that organizations that say this, you still have to report to the CEO at the top. And when we recruit new staff, we look for personality above all else, and this is great. I don't know if you have any more experience than me with Timpsons. They seem to be very nice, polite people. But
I attended an event one time, and one of the sons from Timpson did a presentation at it, and he talked all about the business, and it actually sounded like a great place to work. It did sound like a really good family business, and the way they run it, they're very invested in their people. So it was quite eye-opening. It was quite a number of years now, but it was quite eye-opening at the time.
Did they not employ like sort of ex-prisoners as well? Was there not something with that with Timpson? I'm sure, to give them a chance to like their social values when they were coming out of prison, to give them a job.
Probably it's like something that they would do.
Yeah, thought that.
I can't actually remember, because it was quite a long time ago that that I attended that. And
they do. They employ lots of ex-offenders. That's a big part of what they do, is giving people a second opportunity.
That's great. The only thing that I'm not sure about this is when organizations say that we have an upside down management structure and they still have a CEO, it makes me think, is it really an upside down management structure? But maybe what they mean by this is just that, people can make decisions, they can talk to customers as they like, in the sense that, they don't have a formalized greeting and so on, it's good, I guess.
Yeah, and then particularly when the CEO's son takes over as the next CEO, it says something about the structure there, doesn't it? Of who's in charge.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and let's see how they draw this. So then now I imagine before your peer group, how do we call it, the thing on Thursday? Peer group something.
Peer group sessions. Yeah.
Peer group session. You would have to describe your structure, consider span of control, hierarchy, all of these things that we discussed, and then discuss any changes. Is this something that you think that you're clear now and that you can do? Can I help in any way, or can I explain something more or elaborate? No? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really wish that I had more hours with you. I know that you don't, you wish that you could have more time to spend on your work, but it was great meeting you. Thank you very much. And please feel free to email me for anything you need. And I will give Jane the material and it will be shared with you.
Thank you very much to you, Eleni. That was great. So we'll talk about this. We'll have our peer group session on Thursday. Hopefully as many of you can come as possible. And we'll go through the workbooks and the growth action plan section for this module 7 on Thursday. So if you can't attend, let us know, as always. So next week's session, we're moving on to employee engagement and leading changes. So that's next Tuesday, and that will be an online session as well. But for today, thank you very much, Eleni. That was great. I think a lot of food for thought for people, which is what we want. And we can go over the workbooks and discuss it a bit further at the peer group sessions on Thursday.
Perfect. And thank you for contributing. Thank you very much.
And thanks to Phil for attending as well. Phil took the peer group sessions last Thursday on my behalf, and he is also a facilitator on the Help to Grow course. So thanks for coming as well, Phil.
I'm the spare. I'm the spare Jane. Nice to see you all again.
Ah, great. Thanks.
What does
Thanks
that
so
say?
much. Thank
What
you.
does that say about your hierarchy? If Jane's the heir and you're the spare, then Phil.
Yeah, I don't know. Matrix hierarchy, we don't know. Nobody knows. You come in and do some consultancy for us and figure it out.
Yeah. Great.
Thank
All right
you.
then.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.